Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next guest is currently nominated for his third Tony Award. You've seen him in shows like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and he's on Broadway right now with Adam Driver and Kerry Russell in a revival of the classic Lanford Wilson romantic drama, Burn This. Please welcome, put your hands together for Brandon Uranowitz. Let's hear it. Hello.
Hi.
Romantic drama. Is it appropriate to call it that, or because you can't say romantic comedy, even though it is
like you
extremely
sort of
funny.
can. No?
Yeah. I guess so, but it's like, it's almost,
I mean, we're talking about grief.
yeah,
mostly.
and I think romantic comedies, you immediately imagine like a meet cute, and then they can't get together because they work in different environments or something.
But I also think that that's what's so exciting and interesting about the play is you can't really categorize it in that way necessarily. You can't put it in a box like that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it could stand as a romantic comedy. It could stand as a drama. It's both and everything at once. Which
yeah,
is
I agree,
amazing about
especially in very specific scenes where it's both, where it's everything all at once. It's dangerous, it's kind of scary, it's hilarious, and then it's mean and demeaning at the same time to certain characters.
Yeah, it sort of runs the gamut. And it puts the audience through quite a journey, too. I mean, I think it's very unexpected for them. I mean, this artwork sort of sells one thing, and you come in expecting this, and you get everything. And I think that's really exciting.
This doesn't come until much.
That's true. It
much
doesn't
late.
come until the end of Act 1, basically.
Yeah. So how was it for you? I mean, this play was written in it was first performed like 86, 87,
87,
I believe.
yeah.
And Lanford Wilson was out at the time that he wrote it. And I think it's interesting, though, your character specifically, because in a lot of ways he's been adapted into a cliche afterwards, but this is one of the first versions of that where it wasn't that. And it's your job as an actor to sort of step in and make sure that it doesn't feel like Will and Grace.
Correct.
How difficult is that for you? Because you do a wonderful job.
Thank you. It's tough because, like you said, Lanford Wilson sort of blazed the trail for this, what has now become a trope, and a very recognizable stereotype in sort of the zeitgeist of the quirky, funny, gay sidekick. And that was a novelty for audiences in the 80s, I think. I think that was exciting and new and fresh.
In the 80s, it wasn't a trope. It was just like, wow, there's an actual representation of some kind.
Right, they're like, oh my God, there's a real gay person living a real life.
Yeah.
And for me, it sort of became about, well, the thing about stereotypes and tropes is that they are all grounded in some sort of truth and reality, right? I mean, they are stereotypes for a reason sometimes, and I feel like, for me, the goal was to mine all of that truth and humanity from what makes him funny. Why does he use humor as his go-to tactic in every single situation? Why is he this way? Because, you know, this play really only has 4 people, and he has blood running through his veins like everyone else on the stage. He's not just an object for people to laugh at. And so my goal was to make him as human and as real as possible. And an interesting thing that happened was, you know, the thing about doing comedy and playing something with humor is you always need the element of surprise to make people laugh. Laughter comes from the unexpected thing that sort of you get hit with, right?
Right. Normally something goes this way, but the joke made it go that way.
It makes it go that way, and that's what makes you laugh. And so in rehearsal, when you're doing the same lines over and over again for the same people day after day, that element of surprise is sort of removed from the equation, and it became kind of stale a little bit. And I started to feel really unfunny, but it was sort of a gift in a way because I was able to really hone in on the truth of it and really break down every single beat and figure out what his motivations were, what his tactics were, and what his relationships were to the other people on stage. And so the humor was no longer a focus of my work at that point. So that finally, when we got an audience and that element of surprise was added back to the equation, the laughter was like a byproduct of all of that work that we did to find his truth and his humanity.
Did you feel like you no longer had to play up the jokes in the writing when you got back to an audience, that you had already? I mean, is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, it never. Yeah, I didn't really have to like punch it as much. And also the thing is Lanford Wilson is such a brilliant, beautiful writer that it's all sort of in the writing. You don't really have to do the work. The words speak for themselves. The jokes are already funny. There's not much work that I have to do. The only work that I have to do is make it truthful.
Right. He's a very clean, concise, clear writer. There's not much that you have to kind of convey to the audience that's not already in the words.
Right.
I'm curious. The character works in advertising. Did you ever think about? I mean, that's not really explored that much in the text. It's just sort of referenced. Yeah. But did you think about like what that character's work life would be like in 1987? And because you mentioned his humor, he's always using humor, and obviously in some ways it's a defense mechanism. Yes. And you think that he goes to an advertising agency, probably still very straight in 86, 87, and he has to use a lot of that humor.
Yeah, I imagine that the things that made him palatable for an audience in the 80s are the same exact things that made Larry palatable in his office.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly.
I feel like the thing that I love about Larry, though, is in the 80s and in an office that is probably very conservative and heteronormative and all of that, he lives out and proud and makes no apologies for who he is. But he does wear humor as a suit of armor, really, to protect against all of that heteronormativity, I think. And so, yeah, I imagine that he is very much the way he is at home in the office, possibly a little more toned down. But he does talk about making jokes in the office. You know, there's this line about they're trying to design this Christmas card for Chrysler, and he talks about what they're trying to figure out what they can put on the card, and Chrysler says they can't use anything that represents Christmas because it would offend, you know, non-believers and all this stuff. And then he talks, they said, Chrysler tells him that the only thing everyone believes in is the family and children, and I tell them that the only people that would offend are homosexuals, you know, so.
Chrysler says good, basically.
Yeah, Chrysler says no, they don't say good, they say, oh, you're right, so we can't do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though he says it as a joke, but like they're very, I think, sensitive to, I mean, advertising is still inherently a creative, artistic, you know, vocation. So I imagine that they're sensitive to his sexuality, even though it might be novel for them. I imagine that they were fairly sensitive to it.
Yeah. You know, I'm curious. This is a very silly, shallow question, but I thought that Adam Driver was only like 6'2". But for some reason, watching him on that stage, he looks like a giant.
He looks like 8 feet and 400 pounds of solid
What's
steel.
going on?
I know.
Is it the shape? Is it the size of the furniture? Are you guys that much smaller than him? What's happening?
It's all of it. He is not just physically large. He is just energetically a massive person. And you just feel his energy whenever he walks into a room. It's what makes him so magnetic on film, on stage, backstage. Like you just feel his presence. But also at the same time, Carrie is very slight.
Carrie's like 5'2", 5'3".
Yeah, she's very small and very thin and gorgeous. Yes. But also I'm short, so like the the comparison, I mean, I think is
But even the actor, excuse me for forgetting his name, who plays Bert.
yeah,
David
Fur.
is like probably like 6 feet tall or something like that. He's
Yeah,
barely,
probably like 5'11", 6 feet.
And even when he's near Adam, he looks.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
just
it's
a
also just,
weird
I know, also, Adam's just got these, like, massive tree trunk legs. Like, it's just, he is a large individual.
Yeah, my friend who I was watching the show with last night mentioned his legs. He was,
Yeah,
he was
they're-
like, why are his thighs so gigantic?
He's
What
just
is
a
that?"
solid, Midwestern dude.
So what was it like when all of you guys first got in the rehearsal room together? How often have you rehearsed or done a big show like this with, I would say, two, fairly prominent TV and movie stars?
Very prominent,
Yeah.
I would say.
Well- Kylo Ren and
Yeah, and Felicity. I would say that the intimidation was more sort of like self-inflicted before going into the room. As soon as I walked into the room, all of that sort of faded away because they're just the loveliest people. And
Carrie's extremely nice.
oh my God,
Yeah.
she's an angel from heaven.
Yeah.
But they're also just very passionate about their work and very present in the moment. So for us, it was just always about the play and the work that we were doing, and so we were all on the same page and on equal footing. There was never this weird like power game that happened. I never felt inferior in any way. That was all sort of my own feelings, like before going into this process, being like, I'm nobody, and what do I have? What right do I have to be in this room with these people? But they quashed that. That was they've been amazing.
Well, you'd imagine that they're doing this because they want to do it. Neither of them is like is like a fallen movie star who's like, oh, I guess I'll
No.
do theater now. They're like,
no.
want
They just
to do a play.
Yeah, I know. Adam's been sort of on this like huge journey upwards. His star is rising very quickly, and he's been doing a lot of high profile movies. But he went to Juilliard, and his background is in the theater, and I think he hasn't done a play in like 7 years. I think he wanted to come back and do a play. Theater means a lot to him. He's extremely passionate about theater. And Carrie hasn't really done much theater at all, and I think she wanted to confront the challenge of it and see what that felt like and what that experience would be like. And I have a lot of respect for that. So this is very important for them. It's not just like a one-off,
You mainly do theater. You have 3 Tony nominations. Is that because you love theater? Is theater your first love, and that's where you'd prefer to stay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, yes, theater is I have loved theater my entire life. It's like where I feel at home. I grew up in New Jersey, like right outside of the city, so I started going to Broadway shows at a very young age, and it's like,
Do you remember your first?
I don't remember I know that my first was Peter Pan. I don't remember it, but like the first one I remember was Crazy for You. And my parents took me to see it like 6 times or something. That and Tommy.
They were theater crazy as well.
They didn't know that they were until they started taking me to theater, and then it sort of like awakened this sort of passion, and particularly in my dad. My dad just loves theater for some reason.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. And it was great for me as a kid because they would constantly just take me to see shows when they could.
I imagine by the 4th time you're seeing Crazy for You, though, your dad, even though he loves theater, is like, yeah, he wants to go see Crazy for You.
No.
Let's go.
No. I joined my dad because he wanted to go again. Like that's how that went. Yeah.
Wow.
No, yeah. My dad my dad is the kind of person that when he likes something, he'll just latch onto it and milk it for everything that it's worth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like same with Tommy. Like he took me to see Tommy 6 times, and I would be the one to be like, really? We can't see like something else, maybe? But yeah, no, theater is where I feel most at home. But also it's just it's where my career has gone. It's where the job opportunities have been for me. It's the audition rooms that I've been able to get into historically. I just sort of have gone where the work was. And it started in theater. You know, I've sort of, my career has sort of taken a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's followed a traditional path in the sense that, like, I started out doing regional theater, and I would do that, and then I would play a lead in a regional production. You know, it sort of followed that traditional path. Whereas some people get lucky and they book that huge film right away, and then that's, Adam did a lot of theater, and then he booked Girls, and that's sort of what set him off. I've just gone where the work is. I love doing film and TV. I love it. I would love to do more of it, and I hope to do more of it. But I also never, ever want to abandon theater.
Did you have when you were auditioning for school or when you were in school, did you have a monologue what was your first monologue that was your auditioning monologue?
For schools, I did a monologue from the Tom Stoppard translation of The Seagull.
Wow.
Which was wild. And also, I think that I did. This is like a fallacy that people think you always have to have like monologues prepared. Mm-hmm. The last time I did a monologue was in my college auditions, essentially, basically, like 15 years ago.
Right, you go on auditions and they give you text.
They give you text for the yeah. You never really have to do a monologue. But I also think my other monologue was, I think it was John Patrick Shanley, The Dreamer Examines His Pillow, maybe.
Were there reasons for those, or were they just kind of like, I could do that?
No, I just really liked the language of them. And they were circumstances that I thought that I could relate to. I also did Prince Hal, I think, from Henry VIII, I think, was my like Shakespeare monologue that I did. Monologues are really, really tough.
To choose or to do?
Both.
Yeah.
It's hard. They're hard to. Oh, there's also a Christopher Durang monologue that I did. I don't really remember what it's from, but it's about tuna. I don't know.
Too much tuna.
Yeah. No, monologues are tough. They're just hard to do. You don't really have a scene partner. Mm-hmm. You have to imagine your scene partner and imbue your imaginary scene partner with certain qualities, and that's very difficult to relate to and bounce off of.
They're very easy to overdo as well, because you don't have that scene partner, and you can imagine you're talking to an audience or something.
Right, it's hard to like ground yourself in
exactly
that because you're on your own. You're like flying solo, so it's very easy to fly off the handle a little bit.
Were there obviously you sing and you've been in musicals, so were there songs that you sang? Did you have songs that you?
Well, no. The interesting thing is that I did a lot of musical theater as a kid. And then in high school, there was an English elective class that was like modern American drama, and we read. The first like real play that I actually remember reading was Sam Shepard's Buried Child.
Yeah. Like in high school?
Yes.
That's amazing.
But I read it and I was like, that's what I want to do.
Did you get it?
Yeah, I think I did.
Wow. Someone recently, because I've read that play numerous times.
Yeah.
And I thought that I got it the first time, because on the surface, you can kind of just get what people want and what's going to happen and how things unfold. And then someone recently, a couple of years ago, was like, that play's about Vietnam. And I was like,
so no, I didn't get it.
I was like, it is? And they're like,
I didn't
all about
get
Vietnam.
It.
And I was like,
I didn't get it.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, but maybe your friend's wrong. No? No, your friend's not wrong.
I didn't
get it. But... I was in an English class and we analyzed it, so I thought I got it.
Yeah, maybe it's not about Vietnam.
I don't know. Maybe it's not about Vietnam. I don't know. But I remember reading that and David Mamet and Eugene O'Neill and Tennessee Williams, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. So I sort of put musical theater to the side, and when I went to NYU, I was a acting major. I didn't do any musical theater, and I didn't audition for musical theater programs. I just auditioned for acting programs. And so at NYU, I did all plays except for my final semester. One of my close friends and I, there was a main stage musical happening that sounded really interesting, and she was in the musical theater program, and I was in the acting program, but we were like, this would be fun to do together. Let's audition, and we did. And, you know, as fate would have it, there was like an agent in the audience one night and signed the two of us, and because they had seen me do a musical, that's sort of where the auditioning started. And I guess, you know, I mean, it's a numbers game, this industry. The more job opportunities you go out for, the greater the chance of booking work.
Right, the more things you can do as an actor.
Yeah, so so I just ended up auditioning for a lot of musical theater, and that's sort of how my career got going, was in musicals because of that.
Your first Broadway show, forgive me if I'm wrong, was American in Paris, right? Or was there another one prior to that?
There was another one prior to that. We don't really talk about it much.
Was it one that you didn't originate a role for?
No, I did. I
Was
did.
it like a short-lived adaptation of a musical adaptation of a 80s movie or something?
No, I wish. It was a short-lived jukebox musical about the Shirelles, and it starred Beth Level, who got nominated for a Tony
of course,
for it.
For the prom. Oh, for that as well. Yeah.
And she played this woman named Florence Greenberg, who was like a New Jersey housewife who discovered the Shirelles at her kids' high school and sort of started Scepter Records. And I mean, the story itself was really interesting and fascinating. The execution of it was slightly questionable. I mean, I played the the dual role of her 16-year-old blind son and her 48-year-old business manager.
This is so great. It sounds like a 30 Rock joke.
Yeah. But it wasn't. It was fully serious. And I made my Broadway debut when I was like 24.
Well, I'm sure that still felt good, even if you had some
amazing.
reservations.
I mean, in
about
the
the
moment,
show.
yeah, it felt amazing. I mean, we all knew that what we were doing was questionable, but I was on Broadway, and I was going to work every day, and there was money in my bank account for acting, so it was thrilling for me.
I saw an American in Paris when it was on Broadway. I thought it was phenomenal. It's actually one like the mainstream musical that I kind of hold all other mainstream.
Really?
musicals up
I
to.
love that.
Yeah, like I saw a few that I've seen recently. Not to mention any names. You know, they're big. There's lots of musical numbers, and there's supposed to be incredible dancing. And I remember seeing it and being like, "Oh, it's not American in Paris." Like the musical numbers in that and the dancing were so phenomenal.
Yeah, they were just very. I don't want to say advanced. That sounds
I would agree with that,
elitist,
though.
but they were just very dynamic. Chris Wheeldon is a genius. I mean, he comes from the ballet world, so he really, really understands. I mean, his job for decades was to tell stories without words. So he fully understood what it meant to move a plot forward with dance. And I don't think we get that a lot in Broadway musical theater, in musical theater on Broadway. I think a lot of times the dancing is sort of secondary, and it's just there to add ornamentation to whatever's happening on stage. In An American in Paris, the dance was very much there to move the story forward. Yeah, it was a really exciting thing to be a part of.
A couple weeks ago, I saw probably the biggest budget musical that's on Broadway right now, and I was not necessarily excited for the story because it's like, it's for families, whatever.
Yeah.
But I was like, the dancing's going to be incredible. It's going to be amazing. And when it was over, I was like, they just can't even compare to what they did in An American.
That's
Paris.
nice.
Were you a dancer prior to that? Did you have any dance background?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up dancing. I was very resistant to taking ballet, even though everybody in my all the dance teachers just sort of insisted that you need ballet as sort of the foundation of your dance training, but for whatever reason I refused. So I wasn't like a great dancer, but I'm a solid mover.
What do you think it is about you that made you refuse what someone said was a backbone training that you need? Because
It just seems like sort of militant to me. It didn't seem as fun. You know, like jazz and tap seemed fun and a little more carefree, and the discipline required for ballet just seemed really tiresome to me. Yeah, I think that's sort of what sort of turned me off.
I think we have time for a couple questions from our audience. What do we got here? Hi.
Hi, Brandon.
Hi.
I want to know if there was a theater role that would be like your dream role to play.
I mean, yes. I mean, I would love to play Leo Frank in Parade, like very much. That's sort of one of those pieces that blends together everything I love about acting and musical theater. It's a very emotional, raw story that you can like really sink your teeth into and be funny and dramatic and sing. Yeah, I mean, you know, George and Sunday in the Park with George, like there's a number of I could go on, but the most exciting thing to me is originating something. So I think the dream role, it hasn't been written yet, possibly.
When you get to originate something, I mean, obviously when you're rehearsing a classic text like Burn This, you can all get together and you can talk about what a line means or where you're supposed to go and interpret it, but you don't have the writer there to interpret it with you, to possibly change the line or write it a little bit more specifically towards your abilities or what your sensibilities are. Is that what you mean by what's so fun about originating something? You get that?
Yes, and you know, like with An American in Paris, that was such a collaborative experience with our book writer Craig Lucas. So I really feel like the legacy, like my DNA as an actor, will sort of live on in the legacy of An American in Paris and that character. And that's a very human thing, I think, that we all just sort of want to leave behind a legacy to be remembered, I think. But also, it's just exciting to be the first to do something and to like leave your mark. And also, it's exciting to see what other people do with it afterwards. That's also exciting. But yeah, the collaboration with a writer is also thrilling and something that I love to do. And you know, it brings out the like writer in me too.
Because so often, especially with musicals, I mean, you are coming in very early on in the process where the writer is still figuring out the story a lot of time, right? The workshop process isn't necessarily like, oh, well, what did this line mean that's already written? Everyone's kind of maybe even figuring out trajectory and arc for a character.
Yeah, when I went in for, when I auditioned for American in Paris, there wasn't even a script yet. Craig Lucas had just written like a 20-page treatment of what the structure of the play of the show would be. It changed drastically, but yeah, we didn't even have like a like real dialogue yet.
Wow. One more question.
Hello. I was wondering. Hi. I was wondering if there was a play or a musical that you saw that changed your way of perspective in terms of acting or your career overall?
There are two. The first was the production of Long Day's Journey into Night with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Vanessa Redgrave and Robert Sean Leonard. It was like 4 hours long, and I never wanted to leave the theater. And that was sort of the ultimate theatrical experience, like the ultimate classic theatrical experience for me. Just the idea of, I mean, everybody on that stage was giving every single ounce of energy they had in their bodies, it seemed. And I was like, that's the kind of workout I want to do. And then the other was when I was in college, before Ivo Van Hove was Ivo, he had a production of Hedda Gabler at New York Theater Workshop with Elizabeth Marvel that I went to see by myself 7 times. It just shattered every single thing I knew about theater. And I'll never forget, it just completely changed how I thought about storytelling and what you can do on stage and do in a room with people that you can't do anywhere else. You know, you walked into the theater and it was just floor to ceiling drywall. The stage was covered in buckets of fresh flowers. You could smell the flowers. And there was a moment sort of at the climax of Hedda's boredom and frustration where they sort of dimmed the lights to just above dark. They blasted Alanis Morissette, and she just tore the stage apart and threw the flowers and kicked the buckets of flowers, picked up the flowers, and started staple gunning them to the drywall. And it was just like 5 minutes of this epic event that was so unique and something I had never, ever seen before. And there were no words, and I got exactly what Hedda Gabler was about. And that sort of changed everything for me.
Those are the best experiences with theater or movies or anything where it just, I didn't know you could do that.
Yep.
How
I didn't know that was possible.
Right. How did you know that this was possible? Right. How did this happen? What was the process of figuring this out? Yep. I had that with one time with, which is crazy to say because it's such a classic text, but Lila Neugebauer did Zeus Story at Signature, and it was Paul Sparks doing the monologue. And I had never read that text, and I just like watching him do that performance and the way that she directed it so minimally, I was just blown away.
Genius.
Yeah. Well, Brandon, it's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for
so much.
having me. This
Yeah,
was
of
so
course.
nice.
Burn This is at the Hudson Theater right now for how much longer?
Till July 14th.
Till July 14th. And it's amazing, and your performance in it is incredible. Everybody,
you.
please give Brandon a huge round of applause for coming in. Let's hear it.
Thank you.